Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Move Daily Talks. I'm your host, Tracy Steen, and today on the podcast, I welcome UK dietitian Catherine Rabess. Catherine, also known as Caff, manages an NHS community nutrition and dietetics service in southwest London, specializing in home maternal tube feeding, rehabilitation, nutrition support, and gastroenterology, as well as running a private consultancy online and on behalf of the Hospital of St. John's and Elizabeth. Caff has specialized knowledge and skills in the management of medical conditions surrounding gut disorders like IBS, gut mobility disorders, inflammatory bowel disease, malnutrition, and long-term neurological disabilities and conditions. Caff is dedicated to sharing evidence-based knowledge to help improve eating habits and overall health, as well as supporting charities and companies that share Caff's philosophy of promoting real food and no-nonsense nutrition. I'm excited to talk to Caff about all of these things, including a deep dive into gut health today. Would you welcome with me, Caff? Here we are welcoming Caff to the podcast. Very excited to chat with her. And from what I've read, we're going to be diving deep into all things gut. Yes, gut health, microbiome, those have been buzzwords lately. We're hearing more of it, which is wonderful because it's something that impacts the rest of our health entirely. So, Caff, welcome to the podcast today.
Hi, Tracy. Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. So you're a dietitian in the UK based, working online with people, working in a clinic with people, and predominantly you're looking at things to do with the gut health, like I said, gut microbiome, gut issues. So often, I remember when my kids were little, they would say, "Mom, I have bad guts." I have bad guts. And I guess the question is, when should we go and see a dietitian that maybe specializes in gut health? Like, what sort of symptoms are we looking at specifically that make us go, okay, maybe it's time I need a little bit of help?
That's such a good question because often people just relate gut health to your poo. And there's so many other aspects when we think about our gut health as well, because we have, our upper gastrointestinal system and we have our lower gastrointestinal system. But one thing I would say to start for anybody is for sure looking at your poo. That's so important. And this type of conversation sometimes can still be a bit of a taboo for people to really discuss it. But that's really the first step. When you go to the toilet, you want to look in the toilet bowl. You're looking out for any sort of red flag symptoms, things like if there's blood in your stools. When I say stools, I mean poo. So if there's blood in your stools, if you notice any mucus, a really odd looking color, if there's a change in the actual consistency of your poo, it might be that it's very, very watery, not formed, or it could be total opposite where it's really, really hard and really dry and difficult to pass. Any of those types of symptoms, we would strongly recommend going to your doctor first as a first point of call. But when you are experiencing other functional gut symptoms, and what I mean by that is symptoms that may not necessarily just reflect on your bowels and your bowel movement. So thinking about things like if you're suffering with lots of bloating and abdominal pain and cramps that you might be experiencing, or even things like acid reflux, higher up in your gastrointestinal system, if you're experiencing things like really, really funny tastes in your mouth, or you're feeling sick sometimes, particularly when you wake up, you're feeling really nauseous. These can also be indications that there's something going on there, and it's really worth speaking to a dietitian and a doctor as well, especially.
So, sometimes you can have bad guts from one week and then the next week you're back on track and everything's good. Or you'll look at your stool, like you said, and sometimes it just shifts and it's only for a day or two and then it shifts back. So are those moments or points to be concerned? Or I think typically for me, I see a pattern, right? Like if I've eaten something, well, if I have had drank any alcohol, I'm really wanting to not have any alcohol in my diet currently for myself. I've learned so
Yeah,
much about just, it's just not great, right?
doesn't work for you.
But
Yeah.
right. But if I have one glass of bubbly, which I'll do from time to time, once a month or something for a special occasion, next day diarrhea. It's just like,
Really?
it's
Yeah.
absolutely, it's like it wrecks my guts. So in that case, I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, are we to be concerned if it's just kind of like a one-off, or are we looking for a regular pattern that's going on for weeks and weeks?
That's a really good question. And for some people, there isn't a pattern. And that's where it can be really challenging to identify, is this normal for me or is this me now? And there's so many other factors that can actually influence what happens with your gut too. So how you sleep, stress plays a part. There's so many other factors, physical activity as well, and the level of exercise, which I know that's your bread and butter, Tracy. So there are all these other factors to take into consideration. But what I would say is that keeping a record. So, what's fantastic and a really good example of what Tracy said here is that, you've identified that when you do drink any levels of alcohol, it's a no-go. And that's probably from you keeping an eye on it and monitoring what you're eating, what you're drinking, what leads to the symptoms afterwards. So a food and symptom diary can be very, very helpful in those initial stages to be able to determine if it is related to certain foods or certain drinks. And I think when we're thinking about a pattern, it's just what's not your normal. So rather than thinking about this has been going on for days, this has been going on for weeks, and sometimes that can lead to delay in, having investigations, having diagnosis. So it's really important, rather than waiting on a certain time, just keeping an eye on what's normal for you now. And if it doesn't seem that way, don't wait, just go straight to speaking to a health professional. Yeah.
And I think people think things are normal too. Like, this is my new normal. I always have diarrhea every time I wake up. And so they don't do anything about it because it's just become such a pattern, or they're always constipated, right? And so I think sometimes we just, well, this is normal for me, so I'm not going to see anyone about it. But you're saying that's a mistake.
Yeah, for sure. I just think you don't want to be delaying any changes that happen. And it's the same with, keeping an eye on your skin, looking out for moles, checking your boobs, all of your breasts, I should say. All these things are so, so important for our overall health. And you can't skip that. You really can't, especially when it comes to our digestion and our gut health as well. So definitely keep it, start recording things. And if anything seems different to what's something you're known to have, then it's important you check it out.
I like the food journal idea. I think that's a really great way. And I think people will just bypass that as such an easy solution, such an easy way to just track what's going on with your own body, right? It might seem a little tedious, but I think it's a really great indicator of what is causing what issues. We have a new test. It's relatively new in Canada here. It's called the FIT test. I'm not sure if you have that
Yes.
in the UK. Okay, so
Yeah.
it's really simple. It's like a simple stool test where you go and then you just dab a little dauber into just into the poop,
Yeah.
and then you send it away, right? But
Absolutely.
it can be your first really easy. It's like no colonoscopy yet. It's a first easy intro if you are having issues. That can be something that the doctor can order for us, right?
Yeah, that's a really good test. What it does is it's looking out for small blood particles that you may not see by the visible eye. So if there is that indication of little bits of blood, then you can go for further testing and things like that. But it's a great first test to have done if you are worried about anything, for sure.
So we're talking about gut health. What do you mean when you say that we should improve our gut health, or we should really pay attention to gut health?
Yeah. So it's important for everybody to have some form of understanding about what gut health actually means as well, because there's so much information online. A lot of it sadly is conflicting, confusing when we're thinking about gut health. One minute we're reading, don't eat these foods because they could rot your gut. Don't eat this because it's going to cause inflammation. Don't do this, chew your food. There's so much out there, but I think you've got to take a step back and understand what gut health really means. So when we talk about gut health, what we're talking about is your gut microbiota specifically, but also the powers of those gut microbes and how they work and communicate with different organs in your body and different bodily functions. So, the gut is connected to the brain via the gut brain axis, and that's the vagus nerve, which is one of the large nerves that runs through your entire body. And the gut actually communicates with the brain, it communicates with the heart, it communicates with hormone regulation, it's involved in our immune system, it's involved with so many different factors, our skin. So we really have to start thinking about the gut microbiota. And within that gut microbiota are trillions of different types of microorganisms. So we're thinking about bacteria, good and not so good bacteria. We're thinking about viruses. We're thinking about different types of fungi. These all have an ecosystem within our gut microbiome. And what's really, really key is ensuring that is this symbiosis, so that there is this balance between all those different microorganisms to allow the function of the gut to really ensure that it is able to be involved with all those bodily functions, essentially. So that microorganisms work to do all those functions too. So it's really, really fascinating stuff. But one thing we've got to remember when it comes to gut health is what is involved with it.
Yeah. I know I've read a lot about it in the last few years. And one of the things that seem to be highlight in so many of the books and podcasts I've listened to is certainly this diversity of food and how important that is. Can you speak to why it's important that we eat the rainbow and that we're getting that good diversity in the foods that we eat?
Yeah, for sure. And the diversity specifically is plants as well. So that's really, really key here. And when we talk about plants, I'm not just talking about, your standard fruits and veg. When we talk about plant, we talk about the whole plant. So we're thinking about the roots, we're talking about the seeds, we're talking about the actual potential flower itself, because all of those different types of plants, which I'll talk about, can provide that diversity specifically into our gut. So when we're having different types of plants, so whether that be fruits and veg, seeds and nuts, we're thinking about things like beans, legumes, whole grains, all herbs, spices, all of these different types of plants actually really are beneficial for our gut, because the gut microbiota feeds off different types of plant fibers. So these dietary fibers, which are found in plants, actually are really, really important to the gut microbes because they feed off them. And that's what helps them to multiply. If you're thinking about that balance of all the beneficial gut microbes, it needs that fiber, it needs those different types of plants to be able to do that. And you mentioned, Tracy, about eating the rainbow, and what that means is quite literal, eating lots of different colors of fruits, veg, thinking about your purples, thinking about aubergine or eggplants, thinking about blueberries, thinking about the reds, the tomatoes, the peppers. All these different colors provide different types of plant chemicals and provide antioxidants. And these antioxidants have such powerful properties in our body, but in our gut especially. We think about inflammation regulation, hormone regulation as well, but also back to that balance. So it's really, really key that we're thinking about diversifying our diets, really.
Yeah, so a lot of people have amazing gut microbiomes based on incorporating or ingesting that diversity. I read about these fecal transplants of people that have really poor microbiomes, and then they'll take the fecal matter from someone who has a really healthy, robust microbiome and do a transplant. Have you heard of, obviously you've heard about that, but that seems crazy. That
Yeah,
seems like a
it's
wow.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And that's where the science is going. Now that we have the DNA sequencings and we're able to really study gut microbiome, we are able to identify, where there are these imbalances and people that potentially do have poorer gut microbiotas, and transferring the fecal matter over to improve that. It just goes to show the power of these microorganisms and what they can do. But one thing I will say on the back of that is the research that's around that is for really specific clinical conditions, and it's
Right.
not something that simple as going to
Yeah.
your doctor and saying, oh, I want a fecal transplant because I've got
Yeah,
a
we're
really
not.
upset tummy. We're
That's not
not there.
happening. Yeah, that's not happening at our next general appointment for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point. Good point. I had strep throat about a month ago, which I was
Oh
devastated by
no.
because how did I get that? I don't know. I had flown and I think maybe from the airplane. I don't know. But I had to
Oh,
go on antibiotics, which I was devastated about. I'm like, I know they're helpful, and that was the thing that we needed to do to get rid of the strep, because you don't want to. I didn't want to let that go on, but I
yeah.
just know how antibiotics can harm the gut microbiome. So I was like, okay, I'm going to be so diligent. I've got my probiotics.
Well done.
Right, I'm taking this. I'm like, so I had a pill in the morning for the antibiotics and the probiotics at noon, and then anyway, and then I was, I already eat a lot of fermented foods like my sauerkraut and kimchi and stuff. So, but I was
Brilliant.
anxious about that, like how much does a round of antibiotics impact our gut microbiome and all of those good
Yeah.
bacteria that I had built?
Yeah, it can, unfortunately. But one thing I will say is that antibiotics also have been developed, and through the years have, the research and science has progressed to the point where they often only, for many of them, I know there's a huge number that will target all bacteria, but a
Okay.
huge amount of them, especially those for urinary tract in the case of like respiratory, will only go to that targeted area. So that's something to also bear in mind. If
Yeah.
you're poorly and you've got an infection and you need to take antibiotics, you should really take them. But exactly what you've done, being proactive, taking the fermented foods like the kimchi you mentioned, the sauerkraut, taking the probiotics that have those specific strains to support replenishing those beneficial gut microbes and that beneficial bacteria after you've actually been on the antibiotics, or whilst you're on them, is a really fantastic way of trying to improve and sort of rebalance things, as we would like to say. Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm glad I did that right.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about plants. 30 plants, you say, the importance of 30 plants. 30, that seems like a lot. Talk to us about why that is so important.
Yeah, so there was this huge, huge, huge study that was done back in 2018, and it was focused on looking at different populations across the world and looking at how their diet was actually impacting their microbiome. So what they did was they studied thousands of poo samples. And they looked at these samples to see, and compared between different individuals. And what they found was that those that were having 30 different types of plants a week, and I'll explain what that
A
is,
week. Okay.
30 different plants a week, their actual gut microbiome and their gut health was significantly better than those that
Mm,
were having 10 or less. So that's where the background is on that. And it's not a small study. We're talking over 10,000
wow.
samples that done. So it's a really strong
Robust.
evidence. Yeah, very robust, and it's backed. So on the back of that, of course, we're now pulling away from just focusing on, your standard 5 fruits and veg a day, or trying to have a bit more in your diet. What we want to look at is really trying to pull away from restricting. So different types of fruits, different types of veg, different colors all
Mhm.
incorporate different numbers as well. So when we're thinking about 30, we're not thinking about 30 different plants specifically with fruits or veg. We could be thinking about different whole grains. So that could
Yeah.
be quinoa, that could be brown rice. It could also be buckwheat pasta. If we're thinking about herbs and spices, all the different herbs and spices all count to like a quarter of an actual plant. And then, there's other things like your beans, your pulses, they all count, your nuts, seeds. If you're to have mixed seeds, each different variety will count as one plant. So, although it may seem quite overwhelming initially, thinking, oh my God, 30 different ones,
Yeah.
but when you take those things into consideration, it's actually a lot easier to achieve than you think. And one of the great tips that I recommend to my clients who are really trying to improve their gut health is, think about going for mixed veg, mixed salad leaves, choosing
Good.
mixed
Yes.
beans, handful of mixed nuts and seeds, because every single one of those equals to the one. So
Smart.
that's,
Very good tip.
uh,
Yes. Right,
yes,
because you can buy that mixed clamshell or tub of mixed greens. So why would you just buy the arugula when you can buy the arugula with the rocket with the,
Chris. Yeah,
spinach?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, good,
exactly.
good tip. Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
great tip.
yeah.
Um,
Another good tip
yeah,
is thinking about the color that I mentioned as well, Tracy. So, like, if you're someone who's a bit of a creature of habit and you always buy, let's say you always buy like green apples, right? If you just buy red apples as well, that's again the
good.
red apple, the green
Yeah,
apple, that's two. So
yeah,
it's all about that color, as I mentioned about those polyphenols. So take
yeah.
into consideration that the colors, different colors too.
I think that we, like you said, we are creatures of habit. We grab the romaine or the head lettuce, we grab the carrots, we grab the celery. Same, 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 same. Um, we had an online challenge, our 30 solid challenge, and what we encouraged the participants to do for 1 week was to get that increase their diversity in their foods. And so we gave them a challenge to choose something from the supermarket that they have never eaten before. And it was
Great.
awesome to see everyone posted their photos of kohlrabi, right? And bok choy or things that they had never chosen and really enjoyed, right? So
Yeah,
the supermarket is full of these things that we can bypass, but wouldn't that be a great thing just to go the next time? And typically they're right beside each other. So instead of grabbing that romaine, what's beside it? Maybe it's
yeah,
the curly kale and you're just going to try that and
yeah.
keep sort of doing that diversity as you go through the market.
Such a good idea. And also starting to understand a bit more about seasonal fruit and veg as well, because often it's cheaper, it
Yeah.
tastes better, and it's something that you may not have necessarily regularly been buying as well. So that's also something to really take into consideration when you're trying to add in more.
As a general rule, I think most of North America, at least, I'm not sure how you folks are doing over in the UK, but we are not getting enough fiber, right? So we're usually 15 grams or under where we should be getting between that 25 and 30 grams for women, correct?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Um, Same in the UK, roughly around 16 to 18 grams. And so much of my work as a specialist gut health dietitian is around fiber,
Mm.
education about fiber and different types of fiber, because fiber is such a complex uh, it's a carbohydrate ultimately, but it's a non-starch carbohydrate. So it's found in your complex carbohydrates. So things like your whole grains, as I mentioned, you've got to think of the fruits and veg, the beans, the nuts, the seeds, all of those things have really good sources of fiber in them. And I think sometimes it's about looking at your diet and looking at your overall eating patterns as well. If you're someone who tends to eat a lot of meat in your diet, start thinking about swapping out maybe 2 days a week, having more veg-based meals, instead of using your usual beef mince for your lasagna or your bolognese, why not mix that with like half meat and then half lentils, or trying to, just going for a bit of a change. If you are somebody that tends to, use white bread or white pasta, why not try a different type of pasta as well? And that's a really good way to start increasing that fiber content in your diet as well.
I have my own opinions about keto and carnivore, but one of the things that I think about one of the things I think about them is, oh, where's the fiber in your diet? Oh, I feel nervous for I guess avocados have fiber, so maybe they're getting that. But what's your thought about that?
Yeah, I'm very against it. I sadly see a lot of people in my clinic who have gone through months, maybe even years of keto carnivore diets, and their guts are ruined. They are dealing with either chronic constipation or delayed gastric emptying, which essentially
Mhm.
means that the guts slow down so much that things are just not passing. I see quite a lot of diverticular disease, which is these little pockets of
Right.
diverticuli found around the gut. And that's all associated to not having much fiber in the diet.
Yeah.
So I'm really not a fan and at all, to be honest. I think it's something that, the short term it may give the results, but the long term, it's really detrimental to health.
Yeah, I am in agreement with that too. I just it's a challenge when you look at these reports online, right? And of course, if you have in your algorithm all of the benefits of a keto or carnivore diet, that's what you're going to see, and you're going to see people toting it. But we often don't see people who have been on it who are now also experiencing lots of these negative side effects that you've spoken about. So it's tough because yes, you could lose weight, and if, for a lot of people who their priority is to reduce their body fat percentage or lose weight quickly, it's going to give you it could give you that side effect, right? That benefit, but at what cost? And for me to take out a whole food group or to take out fiber, especially when I've read so many studies on the benefits of helping to prevent things like colorectal cancer and different other
Yeah,
types of cancer, I just
yeah,
can't see why people would want to take that out of their diet.
for sure. It also reduces cholesterol, having really good
That's
amounts of
right.
fiber. So, it's got all these beneficial heart properties as well. So I think it's just something we can't skip on. Like we have to be having more fiber in our diet and just taking those small steps, whether it be choosing more of a higher fiber breakfast cereal, instead of your usual cornflakes or those which are lower in fiber, going for more things like porridge oats or bran flakes, those types of things are really going to help too.
Right. And then pumping it up with fiber by adding things like your nuts and seeds and raspberries and chia seeds. And right, there's lots of ways that you can sprinkle that on salads. You can sprinkle that on breakfast cereals, like you said, and
Yeah,
have them on your dinner plate. Just every meal for me, I'm thinking, what's my protein source? What's my fiber source? And I'm trying to prioritize those things with
yeah,
diversity.
yeah, yeah.
Only a few things to think about at every meal. Kath, you have a book out. Can you tell us about your book?
Yeah, sure. So my book is called The 30 Plan and why eating 30 plants a week will revolutionize your gut health. So lots of the stuff we've spoken about already today, Tracy, I've really honed in about in the book. So the focus is really about putting a spotlight on the power of fiber and the importance of this plant diversity. There are over 50 recipes in there,
Oh,
all with different numbers of plants in there. And, it's got a plant points planner. There's stuff on myth busting and really trying to get to the bottom of the evidence around nutrition and gut health. And there's a huge section on lifestyle too, because often we
yeah.
focus so much on nutrition and food when it comes to gut health, and rightfully so, because the gut is involved with absorbing nutrients and it's super important for that side of things, but we've also got to take into consideration our lifestyle. So sleeping, our eating, stress, all of these other factors that can really play a huge part to our gut health too. So yeah, that's really what the book's all about.
Wonderful. I want to get it because yeah, sometimes you just need ideas as well. And I really loved what you said about with the 30 plants. I didn't realize, I didn't even think that adding, your marjoram, your thyme, your basil, your oregano, that would be, what did you say there, a quarter of a
Yeah,
plant? Okay, so if I had all
of
four of
plant
those, then
point.
I've got one source, right?
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. And it's the same with
Okay.
like good quality extra virgin olive oil. That also counts as a quarter of a point because of
Okay.
the powerful amount of antioxidants and
Sure.
polyphenols that are found in extra virgin olive oil. You'll be pleased to know, Tracy, if you are a chocolate lover, dark chocolate, so
Yes.
more than 70% is also adds up to a quarter of a plant point as well. And things like green tea also
I'm
contribute to the
drinking
plant.
that.
Ah,
I'm drinking that right now, green
excellent.
tea. That's good. That's good.
Excellent. Yeah, green tea and good quality, filtered coffee as well. So there's other factors that you could take into consideration, not just about the plant-based stuff. So there are other things that you can factor into, which is great. And the nice thing about it is it's all about how to add in more, how to be, creative with what you're eating, thinking a bit outside the box. That's the nice thing about it. There's no restrictions here, really.
Yeah, we all need ideas that sometimes we're just stuck and ideas are great. So I look forward to that. Oh, Caff, where can people work with you? Where can they find you online?
Yeah, so you could find me on my Instagram, on well, most socials actually, as Caff Dietitian. So that's CAFF Dietitian, but that's with a T and not a C. And you can connect with me on Facebook as well. So feel free to get in touch, and yeah, it'd be nice to connect with as many people as possible.
Wonderful. And I will link her book as well as those handles down in the show notes. So take a look below. If you're watching on YouTube, they're in the show notes below as well. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks, Kat, for all of your
Thanks so
information.
much.
Yeah, that was really helpful. Lots of great tips today. All right, folks, go move daily now in your fitness, wellness, and nutrition. And I'll see you in the next Move Daily Talks.